Hello, so this is the second video of the video series between BusinessWorks Container Edition and the Amazon Marketplace. In this video today, we'll be looking at how we actually set up and deploy an ECS cluster that will have the TIBCO BWC based Docker image, be able to push into ECR repository, and then setting up the cluster itself. So if we go to the launch screen of TIBCO BusinessWorks Container Edition, and we can actually have a few options, but right now the only version available is 2.3.1. In the future there'll be other versions as they come out, and then we can also select which region we want to deploy our cluster to. In this case I'm going to use US East North Virginia. And then deployment option, set it to set up ECS cluster, and then here we have the launch button that'll take us to our CloudFormation console. Notice that the template is already filled in for you, so it's an S3. It just pulls it from that URL. If at any time you need to change it, you could always just change it here. So let's say you don't want to use the default template that we provide. If there's something you want to change, you can do that there and then use that. In this case, I'm going to use the default, so I'm going to just hit next. So now there's a few details you have to fulfill. Set up a name. And you have or it gives you a default name, but you can change this to whatever you want. In this case, I'm just going to leave it the default. Cluster size, so this is just what you want your cluster or your ECS cluster to be when you first deploy it. This can always be changed later on, and then you will also attach auto scaling later on as well that will let us change this depending on the load. EC2 instance type, so if there's some sort of requirements for a certain instance, you can change the type here. As you know, for pretty much all of the different types of instances available on AWS, they all have key features, or they have certain things that they do better than others. So depending on what your workload might be, you might want to change it to a different type as well, or size. Volume size, so the size or the backing between the EC2 instances on the cluster itself. The default value is set to 30 gigabytes, but you can change that depending on what your sizing needs are. And then setting a key pair. So I have a pre-existing key pair ready, so I'm just going to use that. But this is needed in order to actually SSH into your cluster if you ever need to troubleshoot or check something out. And then this base image customization. So we're actually going to do this later on in a future video. But for now, we want to set this as yes and give it a name. So I'm going to say BWCE bucket image customization. So what is this going to do? Well, it's just going to create an S3 bucket with this name into it. And essentially what we're going to do later on with this bucket is we're going to be able to install our drivers, bundles, certifications, and plugins that we may need to extend our BWC image in the future. So let's say if I want to use Salesforce, out of the box, BusinessWorks Container Edition doesn't have Salesforce installed onto it. So I'd have to install the BusinessWorks Container Edition Salesforce plugin, and that will be done on this bucket. So I'm going to hit next. I can provide some options, so I'm going to just set a name. And I'm going to say BWC ECS cluster, and then permissions. So if I have some sort of permission, I can set that if I want to. And if not, then CloudFormation itself would define those permissions. So right now, I don't have, I'm not going to set anything. I'm just going to choose what or essentially CloudFormation is going to choose what the roles are and their permissions will be. And then if there's any advanced details that you want to actually put into it, you can. Of course, all of these things can also be changed and added once you actually deploy it. So right now, let's say if I want termination protection, I can have it disabled, but later on I decide, okay, I want to make sure that my cluster doesn't accidentally get deleted by someone. I'm going to enable it. Certain things like that. So we'll hit next, and it'll just give us a view of what we actually are doing. Also, you can see an estimate of the cost as well. It'll just pop up a new tab and show you how much it costs depending on what the CloudFormation script does. This will change depending on like the sizing, instance types, and how much the volume size of the EC2 instances are. So once this is done, you just acknowledge it and then hit create. And so now what we should see is, if I refresh that, create in process. So if I actually click on the stack here, you'll see these events. You can also click on these different things. So you'll see still creating process. Over time, these events will populate. So this may take a few minutes. But once it's done, we'll walk through a little bit more of that. So just pause it for now. So after a few minutes, you'll see that the create has been complete. So we see create complete, CloudFormation stack, and here you see the actual status that says create complete. So it already created our cluster for us. We can also check the overview output. So if we look at our outputs, we can view the different values for certain keys. So in this case, my S3 bucket that I asked to be created, this is the actual link if I want to get to it. If I want to actually get to my ECR repository, I can do that as well. So just open a new link in the actual cluster itself. So I can open a new link for that as well. So this is where the base image is stored. So if you notice it says 2.3.1, it created it for you. You don't have to worry about putting that on there. You can use that. So it generated that for you. And then the actual cluster itself. So we can see that we have 2 registered container instances. We have no tasks running. So of course we have no applications actually sitting on this ECS cluster. But if we see here, we actually have 2 instances sitting on 2 different availability zones. So we have two availability zones to keep that high availability. So if one goes down, our other containers, our traffic can be routed to our other ones. And then just like in any other type of ECS cluster deployment, you can match metrics and such. If you want to actually see this on the EC2 instance, you can just go to EC2. And if you click on running instances, you'll see that you have your 2 instances running there. So if I wanted to SSH into this, I would just use the key and I would go into my actual instance and I can view that as well. So yeah, now we actually have our cluster deployed running on ECS. In future videos, we'll deploy an application onto our cluster. And we'll be leveraging this to actually have our BWC image running in the cloud. So in the next video, I'll actually be talking about how you can extend the BWCE base image. So like I said, if you look at the container service, you just have 2.3.1 right now, and that's just the base image. But let's say I wanted to use something like Salesforce, or if I wanted to use S3 or SAP or some other type of plugin that we provide. It's just a matter of running this CloudFormation template, and actually it will create that for me. So we'll run through that in the next video.